Hello and welcome. This is Michael Beach, and you are dialed into the What Are You Doing podcast. This is the show for thought leaders who are investing in the next generation of leadership for their organization. This is also the show for emerging leaders who want to become that next generation of great leaders. Together, we can develop leaders who will, in turn, develop more leaders, and will end up making a difference in our economy, and will end up making the world a better place. We are excited to be able to bring you another What Are You Doing podcast episode today. We're very fortunate to be able to contribute to the success of forward-thinking, fast-growth companies as we help them grow into great companies with terrific culture. I'm especially excited today to have the opportunity to introduce you to a new friend of mine, Melissa Worrell, a tremendous executive coach who helps her many clients with emerging leader, business, and career coaching. Over her 18-year career, Melissa has focused her efforts on leadership, talent development, and business strategy. She has a very diverse career experience running the gamut from entrepreneurial business startups to running franchised organizations to significant roles in the leadership of very large corporations. I could continue with the superlatives and I could go on and on about Melissa's amazing background, but you get the idea. What I like about Melissa is that she has a keen knowledge of team culture, a very positive attitude, and a very positive mindset. And she shares my passion for developing people who have the knowledge, passion, and purpose to have a very positive impact on the bottom line of their company. Melissa, it is a pleasure to have you here, my friend. I've been looking forward to today's episode and to having you on as our guest for a very long time. I can't wait to get started with our interview. Welcome.
Thank you, Michael, for having me. I have been looking forward to our podcast as well, and being on your podcast as someone that I look up to and has been a coach for a long, successful career. One day, I hope to be in similar shoes to you, and happy to be joining you today.
You are well on your way, my friend. I'll be struggling to keep up with you, I have no doubt. Well, for starters, Melissa, I'd love to ask you to give our listeners a little bit of background on something that you're excited to be working on right now in your coaching business down there in Iowa.
Sure. That's a great question, Michael. And I think for me right now, when I first started coaching, it was about working with clients that wanted to build their leadership skills, elevate their executive presence, and working with those individuals. And what has naturally come to light is small business owners and executives that are in their first VP role. And what has been a tremendous opportunity is just to see the similarities that regardless of what industry someone is in, the path and the journey that those leaders are going forward, and how the culture of the organization and the things that they're working with on their team, how much that really matters. And I've said for a while that for me, it's really around 3 Ps. So people, purpose, and passion. And with those 3 things, we can do anything. And really realizing that people are our number one asset, whether you're an organization, a small business, or a solopreneur, how we treat people and how we help grow that is so important. And so my focus right now is all about how do we get people to realize that people are our number one asset, growing our leadership in that way.
Marvelous. I love the simplicity of the 3 Ps, the people, purpose, and passion. Great way to keep people focused on the most important stuff.
Right.
Well done.
Yeah.
Do you happen to remember how you became involved in developing leaders? At what point in your life or your career did you become interested in leadership?
Sure. That's a great question. Right out of college, I invested in a franchise, and it probably was a crazy thing to think about. I think back now, if I was being in my 40s, being 22 and doing that, it was just this giant leap of faith, or a leap of just not knowing that it was scary. And that was the first time that I really had the position to hire and develop team members, and realizing that the people that you bring into your organization are one of the most critical things to whether your clients stay or whether they go. And so how you treat people, how important it is to remember your clients' names. And why I say that is you realize very quickly that you need to take your time to hire the right people. And then once you hire the right people, to invest in them so they can be their best selves, and to recognize how you treat people and the way that people feel is why they stay. And so that was a long time, 20 years ago, right? Hiring my first team members. And I still remember hiring my first team member, and her name was Emmy. And she was this incredible, passionate person who gave our members this incredible feeling, right? And you wanted to hire people that are like you, that they put people first. And so she was absolutely that person. And I think that was that first time when you really realized that the people you hire for your businesses or your organization are a reflection of you and your culture, and just how critical that role is in getting the right people. It's not about putting a body in, or a warm body in a seat. It's that it's the right person in the right seat.
Amen. Well, I have to give you a tip of the cap. I thought I had a lot of confidence, and I'm just sitting here in bewildered awe because at the tender age of 22, you plucked down the money to buy a franchise. That's an extraordinary amount of confidence for somebody coming out of college. Good for you. Obviously, it worked out well.
It did. And Michael, when you say confidence, it might have been just unknowing eagerness, right? To just go do something. Anyway, so yes, it was just incredible. I acquired 700 moms in a course of a year. It was a women's fitness franchise. They looked at me as some young whippersnapper, and they were incredible humans. I look back on that experience as just eye-opening. I learned a ton, but I also had these amazing women that just wrapped their arms around me as like this young kid, right? So it was great. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I don't know where she is, but here's a shout out to your very first hire, Emmy. I would imagine she probably benefited greatly from being affiliated with you. And if you happen to be listening to this podcast, Emmy, you need to reach out to Melissa and say hello. She got you started on whatever you're doing these days. So check in and say hello. Melissa, did you have any leadership mentors along the way who made a big investment in you or made a big impression upon you?
Another great question. So in the franchise world, I'd say my first big mentor or someone that I looked up to was the Curves for Women franchise owner that I worked for in Minnesota. Her name was Kim. She was a 35-year-old, had went to school to be in science, which I was a science degree as well. And she sort of set me on this path of, you could go back to school to get your master's or get a doctorate, but I went down that path. You're really great with people. And so she kind of was the person that spearheaded that, planted that seed is maybe what you would say around business ownership. And she had the comment to me once of, if I can do this, why can't you do this? And I was like, yeah, why not? And so she was incredible. And after I moved to Seattle, I opened both of my franchise locations in Seattle. I would say my next mentor, or really a coach type individual, was a gentleman who was the owner of the law firm in the building that I rented my first space. And he took a risk on me, right? I was a 22-year-old kid. I had no experience in owning a business or renting space. And he allowed me to sign a lease in this brand new building he had just built. And his name was John Demko, and just an incredible man who also kind of made sure he took me under his wing. And I feel like my dad, when he drove me out to Seattle to drop me off, John realized that my dad was leaving his oldest daughter in a city that she had no idea what she was doing or where she was living. And he kind of took on that fatherly role. But along the way, I've had many great mentors. And I think the great mentors, when you also have a leader who maybe isn't a great mentor, you really appreciate and look back on those ones across your journey that have given you the time, they've given you the effort, they've given you clear feedback, whether it was good or bad, of things that needed to shift.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
I agree with you completely. So, Melissa, I'm curious if you would share with our listeners what you are doing lately to raise the level of your leadership game these days.
That's a great question. And I've always been taught that leaders are readers. So I'm a big proponent of reading different business books, different journals, Harvard Business Review, things like that. I also am continuing my coaching journey and education through gaining additional hours for my IC accreditations. And then another thing I would add is just having a mentor coach. So as a coach, I think it's very important that coaches have coaches. And I do have a mentor coach who's in Chicago, and we meet twice a month on all things, whether it's personal or professional, as to assess an entire human. It's as much the professional things that you're working towards, your goals and your outcomes, as well as those personal things that you're working on to be your best self.
Wonderful. So you're making quite a few investments in yourself. Good for you. So you mentioned that leaders are readers. I am a big fan of libraries and great books as well. I'm curious, what is the best business or leadership book maybe that you've ever read? Do you have a favorite?
So one of my favorite books that I've ever read is True North. I loved that book. Another book that is on my top is Good to Great. I have both of those on my bookcase at all times. They'll never not be there. I'm currently reading a book on habits, which I think habits are something that are very interesting on how we create habits. How do we implement and instill new habits or get rid of bad habits, right? What we perceive as bad habits. And so that's one that I'm in the middle of. Another book, actually, that's a recommendation by you, Michael, is I'm reading Emotional Intelligence 2.0 and took the assessment to get my baseline. And
fantastic.
Yeah, I love that book gives you an opportunity to take it 6 or 9 months later to be able to see progress that you've made. So those are ones that I'm currently in the midst of right now.
Wonderful. Well, I'm a big fan of True North as well. What was your big takeaway that really resonated with you?
True North, I actually read in my MBA program. And I just remember reading it thinking, man, this is a great book and this is timeless, right? They just stand the test of time. And so I would need to go grab the book to pull out one of my earmarked pages. But I think it's more of adding just that content and the repetitive things about what great leaders exhibit. And anyone can call themselves a leader, but what are the things you do on a daily basis? And one of my favorite phrases is great leaders are the ones that do things regardless of who's watching, right? And it's when no one's watching. And so I don't have a specific quote or piece from it, but I can see the cover. It's blue. It's sitting in my library, and I just love the book.
It is a great book. I remember being struck by the power of authenticity. And it was something that I didn't think about nearly often enough, right? How important is it that you be authentic, that you be yourself, that you work on yourself as a leader? Because if you don't have yourself shined up, it's going to be really tough to help others to achieve greatness along the way. I always ask my guests a little bit about music because I'm a huge music fan, and I think everybody's probably better off when they have a little bit of music in their life. Do you have a favorite artist or a favorite musical group?
I thought this question was great. I really love words in songs. So one for me that I've just come to really love in the last 6 to 9 months is Turnpike Troubadours. I would call them like a country rock. They have a song that is Happy Accident, and it just talks about sometimes things maybe are an accident, but it's a happy accident. Other one that's really resonated for me lately is John Prine. He wasn't someone I listened to a lot. And after he passed this year, I just started listening to him on Spotify, and he really resonates with me as well.
Yeah, he's a great American treasure, to say the least. Very sorry that he passed. And I think one of the greatest things that touched my life from John Prine's life was Bonnie Raitt became a big fan of John Prine, and she recorded Angel from Montgomery many, many years ago. And I think as great as his version was, I think Bonnie Raitt took that song to a whole different place. And it's kind of like a religious experience for me whenever I hear it. Crazy. What a great songwriter John Prine was. Well, that is magnificent. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your musical background and tastes with us. We appreciate it. I want you to think back now on your life and your career, and I want to ask you a question about the one accomplishment maybe in your life or your career that makes you the most proud.
Sure. I take a big sigh because there's been some pretty incredible moments along the journey. And I think the one I'm most proud of is when I moved to Seattle and started the franchise, and when I sold it, I started an insurance agency, and they had approached me to become a corporate employee of Farmers Insurance. And with that, it meant moving to Cincinnati, Ohio, which I had never been to Cincinnati in my life. And the job was to go recruit agents to do what I'd been doing. And I made the decision that I was going to take that leap. I sold my agency back to Farmers at the time and packed up all my stuff and moved to Cincinnati, Ohio. And I was the only individual in that office of recruiters who had any experience with farmers. All of the other people had been recruiters, but they hadn't necessarily worked in insurance or worked for the company. And so it was a really neat opportunity to be a subject matter expert, but to also learn something I had never done before. I had been an agent, I had been recruited, but to become a recruiter and talk to individuals about what it's like to start your own business, and that it doesn't matter where you came from or what your education level is. If you have the grit and the determination to go out there and build a scratch agency for an insurance company, how great you could build this business and the residual income that comes from doing so. That is one of the things that I am absolutely most proud of in my career.
What a fantastic accomplishment. Good for you. Sounds like something very satisfying to be a part of.
Absolutely. You're changing people's lives, right? They're betting on themselves. They're also just as much entwined in helping them get there and navigating what small business ownership looks like and the great things about it, but also the huge challenges that you overcome along the way.
Right. Yeah, there have been many things I've gotten involved in my career, but nothing's been quite as satisfying as helping people grow their businesses and have increasing success year in and year out. Yeah. Very worthwhile thing to be involved in. Is there a particular aspect of leader development that you'd like to talk about with us today?
Sure. You know, the thing about leader development is really about people and teams. And how do you develop teams that thrive when things are good, right? And you're hitting all your goals and you're knocking it out of the park. It's easier to be a people leader. When things are challenging and you're navigating obstacles or unforeseen things like COVID, how do you rise to the occasion and being a people leader in that instance? And really around culture, how you treat people, how you help rise up people that are beneath you. How do you help them identify their core strengths and then work on them getting that next promotion? That really brings a lot of passion to me, is when you get to see people around you promoting, advancing, being the best that they can be, and knowing that they have the support of the leader that they work with and for.
Wonderful. I'm curious, Melissa, what's the greatest leadership advice that anybody has ever shared with you? Do you happen to remember it? Do you happen to remember who shared it with you?
You know, the thing that comes to mind first and foremost, and I don't know who shared it with me, but I've been saying it forever, is speed of the leader, speed of the pack. And what I mean by that is first in, last out. It doesn't mean you burn the candle at both ends, but that you're willing to roll your sleeves up and do anything of anyone that's on your team, whether you're the senior vice president or the C-suite within an organization. If letters need to get mailed, everyone chips in and they're working on getting the letters out. That you don't have that, well, I'm the top of the ladder, so therefore everyone must do what I say. And it's more about, are you willing to do all the things that you're asking your team to do? And I think speed of the leader, speed of the pack 100% embodies that idea.
What a wonderful piece of advice. That's fantastic. I think that's terrific. Listeners, I hope you're paying attention, because right there, that was worth the time invested here today. Well, we're going to take a break at this point, Melissa. We're going to give our sponsors a chance to give us a quick message, and we'll be back in just a few seconds. Hello, this is Michael Beach with Michael Beach Coaching and Consulting. I want to tell you today about lots of free things that we can provide for you at no cost that are going to be incredibly valuable. If you're an aspiring leader or you want to learn more about developing leadership within your organization, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We put blogs out monthly, posts out almost daily. We have a YouTube channel, Michael Beach Coaching and Consulting, that has a series of videos on leadership and accountability and many others. Of course, you can subscribe to this podcast. In addition, you can send us a message at info@michaelbeachcoach.com, and we'll be happy to sign you up for our monthly newsletter, where we always include free tools for everyone who signs up for the newsletter, and we tell you what's going on at our company. Again, this is Michael with michaelbeachcoach.com. And we are looking forward to you signing up and subscribing to our blog, our video, our podcast, or our newsletter. Thanks. All right, we are back. We are with Professional Business Coaching Alliance certified coach Melissa Worrell. Melissa, great to have you with us today. my next question for you is this. How much value do you place on emotional intelligence when you're recruiting or when you're developing great leaders?
Oh, Michael, this question, it hits the sweet spot for me. And what I mean by that is I think emotional intelligence, as it's become something that is talked about very often nowadays and probably needed to be talked about in the past and didn't necessarily have a definition for itself. But I think about great leaders who have maybe medium IQ, right? And that's not to diminish their capabilities, but they have very high EQ and they really understand people. They have empathy. They communicate. They really think about how things affect others before they have a reaction. They reflect. Those abilities of emotional intelligence are huge. And I think as we look to the future leaders and as the baby boomers are retiring in massive numbers, how much EQ our future leaders have and current leaders develop within themselves and take that time to really learn what good EQ looks like and how they grow it, right? How they learn it, develop it is huge. People don't just show up to work anymore and say, I'll do whatever it takes. And I don't care if my leader is a jerk. People have choices and they will work for organizations that have good culture and have leaders with high emotional intelligence and understand the importance of it.
That's terrific. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that emotional intelligence is really one of the great differentiators. And I've worked with some amazing leaders whose emotional intelligence was just off the charts. And they weren't necessarily the most technically astute leaders, but their ability to bring out the best in themselves and to bring out the best in everyone on the team was just astonishing to me. Terrific stuff. Melissa, I know that as part of your coaching practice, you have worked quite a bit with emerging leaders, people that are first-time leaders or maybe second-time leaders and want to get better. What are some of the primary things you try to teach them as you're working with them about management and leadership?
Fantastic question. And yes, emerging leaders is absolutely a passion of mine. And where it became a passion is really around, as I was going through my leadership journey, if I would have had additional training, I just wonder how many of the mistakes I could have avoided. And you learn lots of things in those mistakes, right? When you skin your knees and get back up and do it differently. However, when I think about emerging leaders, one of the things that comes up very often is this thought around executive presence. And what always comes to surface is that executive presence initially, emerging leaders think it's a look, right? It's a suit, it's an outfit, it's a presence of their person. And then you start digging into it and asking really curious questions. One of my favorite questions is when you think of C-suite or senior leaders that have great executive presence, what do they exude to you? And this list starts to emerge. And when you look at the list, the words that the client or the emerging leader is saying has nothing to do with their appearance or the clothes that they're wearing, right? That's part of it. But it has more to do with the confidence, the voice that they bring to the table, that they know the audience, that they have high EQ. And so that's one of the things that I think is most relevant when working with emerging leaders is just that their thoughts and their true definition of what executive presence is. Another thing we work on a lot as leaders move up is just navigating, going from an individual contributor to managing a team or leading a team, delegation. How do you set boundaries? And boundaries aren't meant to be hard yes or no's. They're more around setting boundaries to protect the emerging leader as well as protect the people that they're working with around what personal boundaries, what are work-life balance boundaries, things of that nature. And the other thing that comes up a lot is just communication. How do they improve their communication skills so they're saying what they want to say, being clear and concise, not over talking. A lot of times as you move into a leadership role, we can continue to speak when we've already made our point or we made our point a couple times. And so just some of those practices around becoming their best self. They obviously were given the role or the opportunity because they are an emerging leader. And then how do they just refine and elevate the skills that they already have?
You said a lot there that got me thinking, and a couple of really fantastic points for our listeners, right? I couldn't agree with you more that executive presence is about a lot of different things, and it's a heck of a lot more than a really snappy outfit or a really tremendous hairstyle. I've seen some amazing executives over the years, and the one thing that always is present in a great leader in my mind is positivity. in all kinds of weather, and having confidence and being engaged and truly going first and leading the team. Your comments about mistakes were relevant for me too. I believed for a long time that mistakes are the price we pay to learn to become better prepared for the future. If you don't make any mistakes, you're not getting better. You're not taking enough risks. So some really fortunate people working with you as you're coaching them to become great leaders in the future. I think you've got some nuggets of wisdom that you're sharing with them.
Thank you, Michael. Agreed on mistakes. It's one of my favorite interview questions, and I don't mean to digress, is tell me when you failed and what happened from there. And what I'm trying to get at is I want to know that they've had failures, and it's not about failing. It's about failing fast and being able to realize that it didn't keep you down. It gave you that motivation to get up and try something differently, adjust, adapt, be agile. And so I love that question for the sake of, I love to work with individuals they understand that failure is part of growth.
Great question, for sure. I love to ask great leaders like yourself if you can reveal for our listeners the best single leadership development investment you have ever made in yourself.
Yeah. Single best. That's a hard one. And not to go off script, but I would say for me, it was two. I went back to get my master's when I was in my early 30s and really took it seriously, right? So in your undergrad, you're young, you're away from home for the first time. And I didn't go on school, but I probably could have taken it more seriously. So when I went back as an adult and took my master's, I really wanted to tackle that with vigor and being the best I could be. And the second thing is when I became a VP at the insurance company I worked at, I asked my boss if I could hire a coach because I knew I needed someone outside the organization to talk about what I was noodling on, making decisions with someone that wasn't entrenched in the culture or how things had always been done. I think now, and I say this to emerging leaders all the time, that I just give them so much credit for hiring a coach early in their career. I wish I would have hired an executive coach or a career coach when I was younger in my leadership journey.
Yeah, it's a terrific investment that pays off almost every time. And some of us are lucky. We are blessed to have a person come along that sees potential in us and takes us under their wing and just generously becomes our coach or our mentor. But sometimes that isn't possible. So you have to take matters into your own hands and make that investment. I'm glad that you did. What has made you spend so much time and so much energy, Melissa, investing in yourself in an effort to develop others along the way as great leaders?
That is, that's one of those soul-searching questions, you know? I think when I look back on my career and the people, like you said, that became your mentors and people that gave you guidance, they saw something in you maybe you didn't see in yourself, and that ability to rise up the next generation of leaders. And at times it isn't even more than being a thought partner as they're talking through what they want to do next and finding that additional confidence in their abilities and things that they already have, but just seeing it from a different perspective or a different lens. When I say people, passion, and purpose, it truly is what drives me, and wanting to help people find their passion and their purpose, knowing their why, finding a career that fills a lot of that why for them. It becomes that it isn't a job, right? It's just part of who we are, and we get to do what we love every single day. So that's why I do what I do.
Fantastic. Well, we're very glad that you do. My next question is about Story Hour. I always like to have my guests share a story with our listeners. So I would love to find out if there's a story that you'd like to share with our listeners. Anything in particular that you want to share, please do.
So a story for me about just leadership journey, I would share the story of being an RVP, regional vice president, and being called back to home office to take on agency development leader role. And within 2 weeks of being back at home office, the leader that I was working for was fired. He was fired from his role for reasons that, you know, were not public information based on the company's decision. And I went from being a peer of regional vice presidents to becoming their boss in 2 weeks, right? And the story of just perseverance and how relationships that I had built as a peer were challenged by the fact that all of a sudden I went from their peer to their leader, and I was never their boss. And I say that in terms of the story because leadership is something that is a gift, right? Leadership is an opportunity to lead others. It's not about being a boss. It's not about telling people what to do. And for me, that story is all around asking questions, finding out what people need, and knowing that I was their partner in that journey, and that I never once wanted them to say, this is my boss, right? I wanted them to say, this is my partner in how we navigate goals. And in that story, I think about, I had some peers that challenged that they didn't see me as their leader, right? It was maybe the job that they wanted. How you just navigate some of those tough conversations, and just a story of perseverance over time, proving that you're in it for the right reasons, and how people get on board over time. And a lot of times it's not about telling someone, it's about showing someone. And just a lot of things I learned in that journey that was not what was supposed to happen, right? There's lots of times that people talk about things that were supposed to happen and how things actually do happen. So I don't know if that's down the right vein of what you're looking for, but I think a story of perseverance and keeping your head up and doing what you know is right, even when sometimes you're challenged in how you're going to get there.
That was a great story. Thank you so much. Perfect. My last question for you, Melissa, is about strong teamwork and collaboration. I have to believe, as you are working with your clients, that you talk occasionally about teamwork and collaboration and try to get everybody to make these a very, very high priority. So tell me how you've kind of developed strong teamwork and collaboration among your clients' teams over the years.
Sure. This is a great final question. And we've all heard the phrase before that we're only as strong as our weakest link, right? And so how do you look at your team and say, we are one team, right? We're one unit. And if you saw my hands, I'm putting my hands together in like a web where they connect. And how do you work together to figure out where everyone's strengths are, where their opportunities, or maybe you call them weaknesses, are, and knowing what everyone does best. And then as a team, I've always thought 2 is better than 1, 3 is better than 2. And so how do you take all of that great knowledge and past experiences to work together and be the best that you can be? How do you create peer groups? How do you create a team within the team where they want to help each other out and they don't see each other as competition? That ability of all boats rise with the tide resonates with me a lot. And collaboration, if you have a team that, I'm using boat analogies, but if you have a team where 2 people are rowing south and 3 people are rowing north, you are basically in a very poor state of making any actual movement. And I'm smiling as I say it because I can picture teams where I've seen that they are just working each other.
Right.
And sometimes all it takes is a little bit of a flip so that everyone is rowing in the same direction, and just the progress that can be made when people work collaboratively versus working in that space, the individual, and working for the team.
Wonderful stuff. I've had the pleasure to see some really, really tremendous leadership teams and some amazing companies delivering some fast growth and consistent, predictable, astonishing results. And the one thing that I notice about those companies and those leadership teams every time is the very, very high priority that they place on teamwork and collaboration. It's really a great differentiator in corporate life and in business. And I'm honored to have you here today to talk to us about it, Melissa. Thank you so much for making the time to join me for today's episode of What Are You Doing? You have absolutely met our expectations. You've delivered the goods, my friend, and put on a clinic today for our listeners. So thank you very much for that. You've given us a lot to chew on, and we thank you for your time and your contribution to the effort. Appreciate you very much.
And Michael, right back at you. I appreciate being on your podcast. I always look forward to listening to them and feel honored that you asked me to be on your show as some of the past people that you've had on your podcast. And thank you very much. Looking forward to everything great that's up ahead for both of us.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. So thank you. Really, really appreciate you. Well, that's our episode for today, leaders. We want to thank today's guest, Melissa Worrell, an amazing coach and developer of human talent in the great state of Iowa. Can't wait to see what Melissa is going to do next. Our next episode will be released soon, and we'll be introducing you to yet another great business leader who who's making a profound difference in the world of business and in the state of leadership around the globe. Thank you, listeners, for joining us, and please do reach out to us at info@michaelbeachcoach.com. If you've got a great suggestion for us, maybe you'd like to recommend a future episode guest, or maybe you'd like to volunteer to be a future guest yourself. Check out our videos on our YouTube channel. Check out our blogs on our website if you'd like some additional leadership nuggets of gold. We'll look forward to our next episode and seeing you all again. Until then, remember, start working to become the person you've always wanted to become by investing in yourself and by investing in your teammates. If you believe in yourself and you believe the best about everyone around you, you cannot help but win. See you next time.